It's 21 degrees now.
Yes.
And I think it's more colder when we come to the border.
Okay, hello. We are French journalists. Is it possible to just film a little bit the frontier?
No, this is a restricted area.
Je crois qu'on est surveillé, Thomas. C'est possible ou pas? Ok, donc là c'est la Russie.
Russia is not a potential threat, it is a threat.
It's a very long border and that creates lots of opportunities to attack.
There are at all times ongoing Russian operations in Norway.
We are actually in a cyber war in any other meaning but legally.
We have seen what happened in Ukraine and it could happen to us as well.
This war is far more important to Europe than it is to us.
I have 25 good years in cooperation with Russia, but I will never trust them anymore.
One line, 6 countries, directly on the border with a hostile Russia, and tensions are rising.
Je pense qu'ils sont en train de checker si on n'est pas un peu des espions russes. C'est un petit peu sensible par ici.
Estonia, Finland, Norway. For 2 weeks, we travelled across Europe and its northern border.
Il y a vraiment rien. Tu checks sur la ligne trafic pour voir s'il y a des choses autour?
Ouais.
Since 2022, Putin's Russia has stepped up its hostilities towards Europe.
Our soldiers have been training for decades to fight and defend our country.
Full-scale military training, cyber attacks, espionage operations.
I go to Moscow and I was arrested. Officers from FSB.
This is how an EU border became a frontline. Tallinn, Estonia's capital. A city between 2 worlds. 100 kilometers away, its European neighbors. 200 kilometers away, Russia. 1/3 of Estonia's population is Russian-speaking. A minority that the Kremlin isn't afraid to manipulate or even instrumentalize. Our story begins with this statue.
Pour la majorité des Estoniens, ce soldat soviétique représente l'occupation de l'URSS sur leur pays. Mais pour une minorité russe qui vit ici en Estonie, c'est le symbole de la victoire sur le fascisme. En 2007, quand le gouvernement estonien décide de déplacer cette statue ici, en banlieue de Tallinn, ça déclenche la colère des Russes.
Des scènes de violence comme l'Estonie n'en avait pas connues depuis 1991, date de son indépendance.
Il ne fallait pas la retirer, cette statue. Nous, les anciens combattants, ça nous blesse.
Dans les semaines qui suivent, le pays va connaître une vague d'attaques cybernétiques massives, une centaine de personnes capables de pirater des dizaines de milliers d'ordinateurs des administrations, des entreprises et des banques installées en Estonie.
An unprecedented Russian cyber attack that shut down the entire country. 2007 marked a new chapter for Estonia, the start of a permanent war without a single shot fired. The Russian playbook is well known. First, there are disinformation operations to destabilize society. Here are 2 internal documents from the Russian mercenary group Wagner, revealed for the first time by Le Monde. Inside, a detailed action plan. Create anti-Europe Facebook pages, post conspiracy flyers, and organize fake demonstrations. The second weapon in this hybrid war, cyber attacks. Since the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine, cyber attacks have surged.
All right. Here we go. You ready?
Ready. Whenever any of our politicians, a member of our government or the parliament says or does something that the ruling elite in Russia don't appreciate, a cyber attack follows, as if in response.
Tere õhtust, Aktuaalne kaamera 26. oktoobril 2007. Valitsus kuulutas välja eriolukorra. Riik on kaotanud küberrünnakute tõttu kontrolli Narva elektrijaamade üle.
The Estonian authorities wanted to avoid a kinetic effect.
Bomb threats coming via email against schools or ports, and if you can't go to that building anymore because it's closed, well, it had a kinetic effect that in the real world that digital bit of info caused an effect. So that's a kinetic effect.
Ukraine is a case in point. In February 2022, the first days of the invasion, Russian hackers hijacked the Ukrainian army's communication system. Since then, Russia has carried out daily cyber attacks in Ukraine to strengthen its military operations on the ground.
We see and take careful notice of the attacks that have been conducted by Russia in Ukraine. And of course, we prepare for this. We need to take steps to make this as difficult as possible and to make sure that our systems stay online even in times of conflict.
In just a few years, Estonia became one of Europe's leaders in cybersecurity. And it's here in Tallinn that NATO allies train together. Monde was given exclusive access to film this day's training. Instead of learning how to defend, they're learning how to attack.
We have a grey square. This is already discovered by the offensive cyber operators but not hacked. The blue squares are out of scope, so something discovered which is not to attack. The yellow squares, which basically are partly hacked, and the red squares are fully compromised. At the end of the exercise, I hope that this full map will be red and we have compromised the full IT networks.
If an arrow is flying towards your direction, there are two options. One is to shoot the arrow, another one, more strategic, is to shoot the archer. So in order to reduce the future threats, you have to go after the source of the threat. So one way or another, offensive cyber competence is must-have for every peace-loving nation.
Keeping the peace as the war draws near. Since 2022, countries on the border with Russia have had their eyes fixated on Ukraine, with one worry in mind. Are they next? One country has long prepared for armed conflict: Finland. It shares a 1,300-kilometer border with Russia. The country joined NATO 1 year after Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
On arrive dans les bâtiments de l'armée finlandaise, on va rencontrer le colonel Makitalo.
Our soldiers have been training for decades to fight and defend our country in a very difficult terrain, in Arctic conditions, but also during the summertime in very deep forests.
Colonel Makitalo is in charge of some of NATO's major combined exercises, such as Lightning Strike in 2024.
We have been concentrating to fight and to combat in a prolonged, very long war, very traditional one against a large-scale attack.
The Finnish army also stands out for the autonomy it gives its soldiers. Spread throughout the country, soldiers are responsible for their own zone's defense.
We have never been certain that we are able to maintain the lines of communication from the top headquarters to the lower units, and that's why we decided to have this mission tactics systems.
But perhaps the greatest asset of the Finnish defense system may be its reservists. Finland's army is organized quite differently from other European forces. First, it has 9,000 professional soldiers, but almost 900,000 reservists, who can be mobilized at any time. Finland also has around 270,000 conscripts who perform their compulsory military service every year.
train de suivre la voiture qui est juste devant nous. Il nous emmène dans les bois. C'est l'armée finlandaise. On est tout près de la frontière russe ici. On est pas loin d'Amina. Et on va suivre un entraînement de jeunes gens qui font leur service militaire.
The opposing force is taking back. The attacker has overwhelmed the defenses. I think the attacker, they used the element of surprise. So they came from surprising direction and they weren't really prepared, so they were surprised.
He's wounded now, and they start to help him.
Pitäkää suojaus yllä!
Voi olla, että vihollinen irtaantuu epävartona.
Kaksi hengistä kärjessä. Kolmosen tappiot. Kaksi kaatunutta, yksi haavoittunut. Kärki! Kolmonen tappiot. Selvitän. Ilmoitus tulee kohta.
Il y a un drone qui tourne au-dessus de leur tête et ils savent pas si c'est le leur ou si c'est celui de leur ennemi.
Kympiltä tuli käsky. Kolmonen. Avoin riviin. Mennään ripeästi. Avoin yli. Tuki oikealla. Kärki. Onko kakkosryhmän kontakti? Kakkonen. Vuorisolla ota kakkosen kontakti.
These guys, after scores, they go back home units, and after that they act as a platoon leaders. They train them and they exercise together with them. And wartime they do have that same team, so with whom they train during this conscript service. With them they fight in a real war if needed.
Several hundred conscripts took part in the day's training. Most of them haven't even turned 20.
I think it's an honor to defend our country. We have seen what happened in Ukraine, so there's more feeling to the training. All the tactics we study are like Russian tactics, and in general when we talk about the enemy it's like always the Russians.
900,000 reservists ready to take up arms. But that's not all. Finnish society as a whole is ready for conflict.
The military doctrine that we are following and applying is called comprehensive territorial defense. And it basically says that no matter what area we are talking about in Finland, there is always military units and civilian organizations that are supporting those units.
Evacuations, for example, are not organized by the army. Underground shelter, food, drinking water, most of this is managed by civilian organizations.
Another thing is that our population has to be able to live in Finland. And when all the resources in a small country such as Finland is used to make sure that this comprehensive security model functions, that creates the societal resilience that I think we have.
A huge army that can be mobilized at any moment, an entire society ready for war. But what are Finland, Estonia, and the other NATO members bordering Russia really risking?
I don't think they're going to try and, invade the whole Baltic states or conquer Poland or anything like that. They have no need to do that.
Justin Bronk is a British researcher specialising in military science. What worries him most is not large-scale war.
What I would be worried about is the Russians taking a very, very small amount of territory on the borders of the alliance, somewhere where they judge it weakest.
Imagine Russia invades a European country, a NATO member, taking just a few square kilometres, an area populated by many Russian speakers. The attack triggers Article 5 of NATO and military assistance from all member states. But the area is so small and so sensitive that some member countries are reluctant to get involved.
The question is fundamentally, what does Russia want to achieve by attacking or potentially attacking NATO? All they really have to demonstrate, and therefore what I'd be worried about, is that Article 5 is essentially a bluff.
In Estonia, a cyber threat. In Finland, the fear of armed conflict. Moving up the border, the threat changes shape.
I'm a Vice Admiral and I'm Director of the Norwegian Intelligence Service. If we talk about the effect of the war in Ukraine, the performance of the conventional forces is less than the West expected, which means that the importance of nuclear deterrence is bigger to Russia now than it used to be. A large portion of Russia's nuclear deterrent is on the Kola Peninsula, just a few kilometers from our borders, which means that our region has greater importance to Russia.
The Kola Peninsula. Nestled in its fjord is the Arctic's largest city, Murmansk. Home to Russia's Northern Fleet, nuclear submarines, and nuclear weapons.
Боевая тревога. Глубина 45, крен 0, дифферент 0, лодка держит глубину.
"150 kilometers away, on the other side of the border, is Kirkenes. It's a small Norwegian port with a population of 3,500. It's minus 20 degrees Celsius. At this time of year, the sun doesn't rise. We have a meeting with Frode Berg.
Hello. Welcome. Thanks.
So it's okay?
Yeah,
And you sleep well?
we did.
Uh-huh.
The former bodyguard has spent his life working between Russia and Norway.
Now we go to a place called Skafferulla. It's an old border crossing point between Norway and Russia.
How far are we now?
Very close.
After the fall of the Iron Curtain in 1989 and the warming of relations between Russia and the West, Frode Berg's work took him to the other side of the border, which at the time was under the direct surveillance of Russian intelligence services, the FSB.
I don't afraid of the Russia, but there is something for me. I don't feel it's not necessary for me to be so close to Russia. You see on the border, it's the Russian and Norwegian border pillar standing like you see there. The yellow is the Norwegian and the green and the red is the Russian. I always like to work with these people. I like to work with Russia, but I have never liked the political system, of course, but it has been also very exciting to travel to Russia, and yes.
In the 1990s, convinced by Berg's profile and links with the Russians, Norwegian intelligence approached him.
Meeting with the Russian, it was important. You can sit 1 or 2 hours, discuss different things. After that, we had a meal together. Then you could relax, speak about everything, also sometimes politics. And we get very good information about how is the life in the Russian side. After every meeting with the Russian, I speak with the police security, debriefing.
Berg's collaboration with Norwegian intelligence increased, carrying out more secret missions in Russia, until one too many.
One day, a leader of this group from the intelligence service in Kirkenes coming to my office. Now you shall only post a letter for us. I begin to feel it's maybe wrong. What can happen? And Frode, this it's very important for us. You have to go. So I say, okay. I go to Moscow, buy envelopes, and put this money and this card from the camera, and send it, and so go home. It was very much stress around me. And when I come outside the hotel, I was arrested. Officers from FSB. Frodeberg has been engaged in espionage, that is collecting information for a foreign state. Been involved in secret cooperation with Norwegian intelligence service. Meeting an officer of the above mentioned intelligence service agreed to collect in the territory of Russia.
The documents shared through Berg concerned Russian nuclear facilities. The Norwegian was sentenced to 14 years in prison. He kept a diary while in his 9 square meter cell.
Desember 2017. Innsjekk. Paralysert, redd og sliten. Fikk 2 høyresko. Satt på kontoret, ingen varsel om lufting i dag tidlig. Tankene svirrer. Gjensyn med Anita, det vil bli sterkt.
After 23 months in detention, the Norwegian was released in a prisoner exchange.
Jeg jo glad for å kunne fortelle at Frode Berg nå en fri mann.
Det lett å være etterpåklok, og gjerne kalle meg naiv, men jeg føler meg alvorlig ført bak lyset og et stort tillitsbrudd fra de representantene fra E-tjenesten. So, how I feel, I'm not angry for anyone. I'm not angry, but I'm still missing some from the intelligence service. Frode, thank you. Only, thank you for what you're doing.
In Kirkenes, for some time now, attention has been focused on one area in particular.
On est en train d'arriver vers le port de Kirkenes. On va voir s'il y a des bateaux de pêche, et notamment des bateaux de pêche russes. Je sais pas si on a le droit. Une barrière, elle est ouverte. On y va. Ah si, regarde là-bas, c'est quoi? Il y a du bateau de pêche, c'est le bateau de plaisance. Il y a une voiture de police qui vient de s'arrêter pour nous demander nos passeports, carte d'identité, carte de presse. Et je pense qu'ils sont en train de checker si on n'est pas un peu des espions russes, des gens un peu suspicieux de nationalité russe sur leur territoire. Parce que c'est un petit peu sensible par ici. Ça y est, ils arrivent. But why did you check? It was for the...
We just have focus on controlling foreign troops.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Rental special. Car and camera, so we always get a bit suspicious. But
of course, no, it makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Suspicious because the area is highly strategic. Historically, Russian fishing boats used to call at Norwegian ports. But since the war in Ukraine, only these 3 ports are still open to them: Tromsø, Båtsfjord, and Kirkenes. Norwegian authorities are concerned that these Russian fishing boats are being used as cover for espionage operations. The Russian nuclear fleet is here, 150 kilometers away. In the event of a crisis or war with NATO, the Kremlin might want to control this zone to deploy its ships more easily to the west and slow down any approach by enemy forces.
Bon bah y a rien. Il y a juste un bateau de croisière. Il n'y a pas de bateau de pêche, ni norvégien, ni russe, ni rien. Bon.
Bon, je vais check sur Marine Traffic quand même.
Tu checks sur Marine Traffic? Genre pour voir s'il y a des choses autour?
Ouais.
Attends, je vais récupérer la cam.
Ah oui, il y a effectivement un bateau de pêche. Je vois l'Azurite qui est à Båtsfjord.
Attends, c'est où Båtsfjord?
Båtsfjord, c'est à 3 heures au nord de Kirkenes. Et ce qui est intéressant avec l'Azurite, c'est qu'il a le profil parfait pour mener des opérations d'espionnage parce que c'est un bateau de pêche classique, mais immatriculé en Russie, qui stationne en Norvège.
En fait, typiquement le genre de bateau qui pose problème.
Typiquement le genre de bateau qui a le profil qui correspond à des bateaux qui pourraient mener des opérations d'espionnage. Et je regarde la presse locale et ils expliquent que la Norvège lui a ordonné de partir, mais visiblement le bateau est resté à quai à Båtsfjord.
The next day, we met Johan Roldsnes, the local head of Norwegian domestic intelligence.
We see a pretty wide scope of Russian means to collect information that they need. And they use a wide variety from cyber operations to human intelligence operations. Russia is isolated now. The Russian intelligence and security services have a clear path in using everybody who has a legitimate purpose to go to Norway.
Legitimate purposes like fishing boats and their crews. Norwegian intelligence told us that a police operation was underway. They're investigating the Azurit, the Russian fishing boat they'd spotted the day before.
Les renseignements intérieurs norvégiens sont en train de travailler un accès pour qu'on puisse filmer, accéder au bateau de pêche russe qui est stationné un peu plus au nord et voir si on peut parler à quelqu'un là-bas. Voilà, on va prendre la route et on y va.
Hello, Fanny Zarifi from Le Monde. Nice to meet you. Thank you for welcoming us.
Can you tell me what's going on here?
The police in Finnmark are now conducting a coordinated inspection of the ship with assistance from the Norwegian Custom, the Norwegian Maritime Authorities and the Norwegian Coast Guard. This inspection is a part of the follow-up on the Norwegian government's decision to expel the vessel from Båtsfjord.
Two months later, the Azurit is still docked in Båtsfjord.
There are at all times ongoing Russian operations in Norway, whether it be cyber or human or other technical.
Faut-il parler d'un axe Moscou-Washington?
Volodymyr Zelensky traité de dictateur par Donald Trump.
Et si ces négociations entre les États-Unis et la Russie réveillaient enfin l'Europe?
Since January 2025, US President Donald Trump has been very clear.
You know, it affects Europe. It doesn't really affect us.
And in Northern Europe, some countries have not waited for this wake-up call to prepare themselves. A realization that's spreading across the continent.